How you doing today? My name is Robert Kelly. I am presenting my speech today. Uh, my speech is the Unit 4 assignment uh, for April 3rd, 2016. I'll be using a few items today, so trying to maintain this contact. Uh, my speech is actually on the Gettysburg Address, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address today. So bear with me. In the spring of 1861 is when Abraham Lincoln gave the Gettysburg Address. It was one of the major battles between the North and the South. Uh, it was one of the major developments of the American Civil War. Uh, between the North and the South. The races abolished the Republic. Abraham Lincoln as the president in 1860. The Southern states withdrew from the Union and framed the Confederate States. Uh, More went along with them after the principal shots of the Civil War were discharged. 4 years of uh, several clashes were set apart. Uh, you had a lot of different fights. You had Bull Run, Appomattox, Antietam, Chancellorsville, and then you had eventually you had Vicksburg, and then eventually you had Gettysburg. There's a lot of different clashes there. There were somewhere in a range of 620,000 men and women, which of uh, somewhere in the range of 620,000 of the 2.4 million officers murdered, millions more harmed of the populace, and the domain of the South was eventually crushed. So it was a major, and it was also the turning point of the war there. Uh, one of the major things there was uh, it wasn't even supposed to be. That was the start of the Civil War, but that was Gettysburg wasn't even supposed to be a major battlefront. It was actually a accidental front between the Union Army and General Lee. So it was an accidental confrontation there. So actually, the underlying there in the spring of 1861, the United States of America split into two nations: the United States and the Confederate States of America. The two restricting heads of the state concurred about what they were creating to break into, running a debate. A lot of it, what happened was, a lot of people think it was over slavery, but it wasn't just over slavery. There was a lot of other evolutions there. One of the segments of our nation's trust is correct and should be broadened, noted Abraham Lincoln in his first inaugural address. That was one of his big things. The main, this was his main considerable question in his message uh, in his own particular Congress the next month. The Confederate president then confirmed and alluded, and that he and his partners had left the Union. Jefferson Davis clarified in the light uh, that in light of the fact that Abraham Lincoln gathered had promised to prohibit the work of African Americans from people in general religions. Let's see what else you got going here. It was a major thing. I think it was on. Let's see here. On the morning of November 19th in Everett, uh, it was a 2 hour uh, 2 hour discourse of the Battle of Gettysburg. It was an importance. The assembled played his song made for the event uh, by B.B. French. Lincoln then rose to the platform and then spoke the address, somewhere to the range of 15,000 individuals. It represented under 2 minutes the whole disclosure and was about 272 words. It was a very memorable thing. Uh, he invoked to establish the fathers of the new country. Lincoln smoothly communicated his conviction of the Civil War. Uh, uh, he would survive whether it would die from the earth. The death at Gettysburg had set our lives into a respectful purpose, he said, and it was up to the living to go up against the immersed undertaking before them. He was trying to get the population to understand that after the Gettysburg Address that you were going to have to rebuild the nation. But he also wanted to demonstrate to the South that it was the turning point of the war, because up until that point, the Union had been losing about every other battle. But at this point, now because General Meade and them, he was also disappointed in General Meade and his commanders that they didn't press forward down to the South, and so at Gettysburg, he was proud of the men that they had turned the point of the war against General Lee, and he was also trying to bring back a nation at one time, and also let the South know that this was a turning point, but also bring back a nation and let them know that they were going to have to rebuild after this. He also did appoint Ulysses S. Grant after this to be his main general. Uh, it also was a big point for Congress to let Congress know what he needed to do after this. So, in all, Lincoln used the Battle of Gettysburg for a multiple of things. So that's why his address was so very, very important at this turning point of the war. You know, he saw it as an opportunity to do a multiple things. So that's why that address, even though it was only 2 minutes long, was a very important, powerful speech. Abraham Lincoln, the background of him as an icon, he come from being a lawyer and won not many cases, but he was astounded at the cases he was. He was adored in the U.S., although although the world as a politician, political legend, he was a virtual saint. He also is known as a hero of the Union and in the American Civil War and uh, a great freer of the American slaves. Special moments in the Civil War would have been the inauguration ceremonies held in Washington, D.C., where he delivers his first address. Also, in April 1861, at 4:30 a.m., the Confederate artillery opens fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston when the Civil War begins. That's where it all began. You got a variety of different times. Uh, some are when April 17th, 1861, when Virginia secedes from the Union. April 27th, 1861, the president authorized suppression. Uh, there authorized suppression of the writ of habeas corpus. Lincoln, July 27th, 1861, Lincoln appoints General McClellan, commander of the Department of the Potomac. That was an important thing because at that one point, when the first battle became over the Potomac, uh, when they defeated when the Union troops were defeated right at the Potomac, if the Confederates would have continued, they could have took over D.C. and the war would have ended. But it obviously continued all the way down through. October 24th, 1861, General Fremont relieves he relieves General Fremont of his command and replaces it with General David Hunter. There's numerous ones. Uh, You can go all the way down. April 20th, 1862, he approves the federal homestead law giving 160 acres to publicly-owned land to anyone who will claim, and then work the property for 5 years. Thousands then crossed the Mississippi to tame the Wild West. So Abraham Lincoln did a lot of stuff throughout this whole time period of his presidency. Another one was August 29th and August 30th, 1862. The Union suffers defeat at the Second Battle of Bull Run in Northern Virginia. The Union Army retreats to Washington, D.C., and the President relieves Union Commander John Pope. And then you have a big one, September 17th, 1861. Robert E. Lee and the Confederate armies are stopped at Antietam in Maryland by McClellan and by superior Union troops. And then by nightfall, 26,000 men are dead, wounded, and missing. The bloodiest battle in U.S. military history. And then September 26, 1862, the President issues the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation freeing all slaves, which is a big thing, which the whole Civil War was, so he freed them all. So you can go all through President Lincoln's term, and you can see words worthy of him. The man does not live who is more devoted to peace than I am, none who would do more to preserve it, but it may be necessary to put the foot down firmly. So he used a lot of important stuff. Then you got his famous thing, 407 years ago, which promotes prominence in 1776. The years of what he's trying to use is from the Declaration of Independence years ago. Okay, and then he's saying that what he's trying to say is all men are created equal. You know, he's trying to let the public know that. The Civil War, Abraham Lincoln said, is the test of whether the country or any country could consider thus committed to long preservation. He inherited that, and he tried to bring no president wanted it, but he endured it and tried to figure out how to bring a nation back together. He tried to convey democracy, you know. He believed that every man should be free, and he had to bring it through Congress, which was a hard time. On April 9th, 1865, General Lee surrendered to him in Appomattox Courthouse to his commander, which was Grant, that he replaced General Meade with on April 1865 in Appomattox Courthouse. And that's where whose ground is Arlington, was the wife of General Lee, who actually was a descendant of George Washington, whose land that was. It goes all the way back to it. He actually also believed there was a need for a better constitution, and tried to enforce that by helping to answer the slave. One of the huge issues left was unresolved was the slavery issue that was underneath Abraham Lincoln. He kept trying to do that, which a lot of people held against him. Lincoln was a lawyer and had problems at hand back in the day. Does the Union triumph with equality of all men? No, because you still had slavery all the way up until the late 80s. You still have problems with slavery in this current day. The founders all created equal. I believe they do, but we still have problems to this day with racism here, because we don't believe. I believe all men are created equal. I don't matter whether you're green, white, pink, purple, or whatever, but we're all Americans, and we need to come together and believe that we're Americans. And that started with Abraham Lincoln being one of our founders, and that's what the address was about. We had a ruptured union back then. He tried to bring it together. Uh, Lincoln was elected president. They didn't. He paid the price. A lot of people didn't want Lincoln to be president, but he won, and he was a strong president. Carolina back then, South Carolina initiated the secession, but as you read through, Carolina succeeded on a lot of things. We had a new nation. He brought it together. He had the Battle of Fredericksburg, was one of the major battles. It did in December 13th, 1862, and there was with about 78,000 men established themselves on the bluffs there at the river there, and they won that battle there. It was a major battle between Union troops, which ultimately led to Gettysburg. There's a lot of other major battles. The campaign for Vicksburg was another one. Uh, you can. The Civil War was a bloody battle. Battle for Charlottesville. You can go through major history. We couldn't go through in one night the amount of battles for history leading up to battle for Chattanooga. Those are all Confederate battles that they won. Uh, Confederates were strong in the South, and they believed they were in the right. But then you get to the Battle of Bull Run, the first battle, and then you had a second Battle of Bull Run. And you had the 7 Day Battle, which ultimately led to Perryville, the Battle of the Ironclads. General Lee was one of the ones that first built the forts in the South. You had the Battle for Shiloh. You can go down, and we wouldn't even get to Emancipation Proclamation. Then you had Gettysburg. It was a critical battle. It was a battle that had to be won, and it was an accidental battle. I will provide you, if you would like, a photo. There's a photo for you guys to see. It's hard to do, but illustration of Gettysburg. I think it's of the little round tops there. But as we go along, the Union was strong. You had a numerous bunch of generals and commanders that died there. Probably one of the best ones. You had General Howe, some of the numerous ones, then the General Henry, General Hunt, George Sykes, General Barnes, General Newton for the Union, General Crawford. As you get to the south, you had General Pickett, George Pickett, famous guys, General Wade, John Hood, General Lafayette. Too many to go. And as you go through the Union battle, the Union song was the battle hymn of the Republic. Confederate, I wish I was in Dixie. Numerous, prideful. These were all prideful, respectful. And then you get to the reason for the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, because the South didn't believe they were in there, and it was happened on April 14th, 1865. John Wilkes Booth, famous actor, and he worked for the Confederates. He was a sympathizer. He shot Abraham Lincoln in the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., because he wanted to end the war, and he believed that Abraham Lincoln was part of hurting the South. And then, like I said, we've already discussed Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg. And it tells you how many troops I think Lee drove through. And on November 19th, President Lincoln utilized the devotion function of Gettysburg, and he created the National Cemetery for the fallen warriors there. In my conclusion, the Civil War is the focal occupation of the Americans' enthusiasm, while the Revolution from 1776 to 1783 made the United States. The Civil War of 1886 and 1885 figured out what sort of country it would be. So one made us and one determined what we were going to be. And so in whole, we needed them both to determine where we were going to get to. And I think Washington was the right guy to establish us, and Lincoln was the right guy to lead us to there. And we needed both of them to get us where we were. And also, we needed one to break the slavery, to show all men are created equal. So in whole, I believe that address is one of our most important, memorable moments in life. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope it helps you understand that address. Thank you.